Young, and I'm here to talk to you about my how my Cursillo experience has affected my life, especially through this pandemic. So I made my Cursillo in February of 2000 on weekend number 618. My story of getting there is somewhat odd. My fiance Katie had been asked by Deb Gaines while I was still away at college. She was on Cursillo 611 in November of 1999, so she actually went before I did. Katie went on her weekend, and as she tried to describe it to me, I was very skeptical. College students are generally very skeptical, and I was probably cranked up to an 11. I didn't understand what she had done that made her change as much as this did. I was not sure about whether I wanted to go, but it was kind of my wedding gift to her since I had just graduated in December and we were going to be married in May. So I was unsure at first, but I did enjoy my weekend. It was a great time of my life as I was just out of college, starting my career and about to marry the love of my life. I remember little bits and pieces of Royos and the people who were involved. Deacon Art and Cindy were running the tiny kitchen at Coleman's Hall. Deacon Pat Murphy was a substitute table leader, auxiliary as they were called back then. And Deacon Aaron was wide-eyed candidate along with me, and these were all before they had become deacons. Deacon Chuck gave the actual Grace Royo, and of course Father Jack gave sacraments. Ken Grenier was the rector, and his brother Dwayne was a leader. Willis was as well. John Bussell gave the leaders Royo. Jeff Hoskins gave ideal. Kevin Parasot was my table leader. Butch Karn was a table leader as well. Gary Baker, Jim Shivers, and Dale Mott were also starting their journey with me. And of course, there were many more that were part of my formation at the time. I suppose the greatest thing I got from the weekend was the idea that God and actually the world are much bigger than myself or whatever issues I might be facing at the time. You see, I was at a point in my life where it's very easy to get caught up in the me of everything. Having just graduated college and starting my career as well as about getting ready to get married, there's a whole lot in just those three events to make you forget the world around you and just focus on yourself. If you see things only as the world sees them, it is very easy to get overwhelmed. But with the lens of our faith in God, we can see that all things have their reason and place, and that we need to live our best life with Him in our focus. One of the greatest quotes, in my opinion, that exemplifies this is from St. Padre Pio. Pray, hope, and don't worry. It seems simple, right? It's not the easiest to live by, but it makes sense. If we keep our focus on our end goal of getting to heaven, and once married, getting our spouse to heaven, then many of the mountains in life become molehills on the road. That doesn't mean they don't bring temporal heartache, pain, and fear. For instance, right now, I'm training our fourth child how to drive, so I understand fear. But in the scope of life's grand scheme, we can deal with them easier. As the Apostle Paul said to the Philippians, we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. And the Paschal Mystery shows us that good things can come from things that are very, very bad to us in the moment. To say that Cursillo changed the trajectory of my marriage before I was even married is an understatement. Katie and I had a lot of long talks and made some decisions that we would not have thought about had it not been for our spiritual reversion due to the Cursillo. See, we were both Catholic by upbringing, but we had not yet made the faith our own, so we were more culturally Catholic instead of living our faith. This reset button helped us to refocus and start building our house on a firm foundation of faith rather than the shifting sands that modern day society provides. This helped us form our ideals about family, career, and lifestyle. We decided that our faith would rule our lives instead of using our faith only when it seemed convenient. After suffering the miscarriage of our first child, we were blessed to welcome 9 beautiful children into the world. Jonathan is our oldest, and he is 19. He's a junior at Illinois State University majoring in cybersecurity. Matthew is 18, and he is a senior in high school while attending classes at Blackhawk and working to obtain his pilot's license so he can move on to a career in aviation. The rest of our kids are still being homeschooled by Katie. They are Lillian, who is Elizabeth, 15, Mark, 13, Luke is 11, Olivia is 8, Fulton is 6, and Edith, our baby, is 4. We've been truly blessed with Katie being able to homeschool our kids. Having 9 kids and homeschooling would not have been in our thoughts had we not gone through social reversion at Cursillo and the subsequent study and focus that it inspired in us. So how has this helped me this last year during the pandemic? Well, it hasn't been an easy year, as I'm sure most of you can agree with. Our year has been full of ups and downs, some related to the pandemic and some not. Like many, when I realized that I was going to be home for a while, I developed plans. How I was going to improve my physical and spiritual health. I knew I was in control and that I could plan all of these grand things. I failed. I unfortunately didn't enrich my prayer life by getting up each morning for prayer. I also failed to make any real strides towards improving my physical health. You could say I was knocked back, like Peter at the Transfiguration. Like Peter, I didn't fully understand the situation. I just pushed it into the understanding that I had formed over the 40 plus years of my life. I didn't understand the toll that it would take on my kids that all their outside of the home activities were gone. I didn't understand the toll it would take on all of our lives to be knocked from our routines so abruptly. I was working from home, which sounds great and convenient, but I was working from home while my 9 children were homeschooling and getting tired of being cooped up for so long. I do love working from home, and we figured out a good balance. So the kids are more. So I thought this was going to give me a ton more time to do the things that I should have been doing before. No running kids' activities every evening, no commute to work. I should regain a ton of time, I thought. But I learned that I have to give myself and others around me grace, that we are all going through something we've never dealt with before. We would all do well to give others grace, knowing that every person we encounter has gone through some once in a lifetime stuff this past year. Some have lost loved ones. Some have been alone far too much. Some have missed their daily routines that are very important for their mental health. People have had their much needed vacations or business travel stopped. Some feel their freedom is being encroached upon. There are people who have not been able to visit their loved ones in a nursing home for way too long. So as we interact with each other, we need to think about the hidden pain that some are trying to keep at bay, that has been maybe eating at them for a whole year now. Jeff Cavins said during his Great Adventure Bible study that most anger and disappointment comes from us having ideals and expectations, but facing a reality that's different. This is the conflict of ideal versus real. Think of it this way. You're on your way home from work. You think you're going to get there to have a date night with your spouse. You feel good before it even happens. Then you get home, and your spouse is in a foul mood because one of your children has been having a bad day and has been super difficult. The first thing that's said to you before you even get your shoes off is a child telling on their brother or sister for something. Kids screaming and fighting, and your spouse is wiped out from dealing with it all day. You realize that your date night is probably not going to happen. Anger and disappointment rise in your chest. You had an expectation. It was raised on a pedestal and then came crashing down when reality hit. This was us, all of us, for the past year. How do we react to government mandates, diocesan directives, family and friends getting sick and dying, not being able to visit family? Forget those travel plans. Katie and my 20th wedding anniversary came and went on May 20th. We didn't get to celebrate as we'd hoped. Who would have thought that we'd live in a time where we couldn't go to Easter Mass? The whole world had an expectation for 2020 that was turned on its head. We were all shut down. As we were all dealing with this confinement, many of us only had outlets of the news and social media. How did the world react to their expectations being smashed? From my seat in the House, the world got mad and basically went mad. Cities burned, people broke into buildings. They decided to hate their common man due to the differing views. People decided that if you wore a mask or followed the government mandates, you were a sheep. Others decided that if you didn't, you must hate everyone. Many were just kind and loving throughout, but of course the media and social media don't highlight those. With not a lot going on, people decided that a federal election was the most important thing happening in their lives. We as a society forgot that sometimes when faced with difficulties, we have to roll with it and have faith. Most things in our lives won't go exactly our way. For instance, in August, we were moving Jonathan to college, to a new place during a pandemic. He moved to school only to do it completely online. He could have withered on the vine and hated his college life because it wasn't going to be what he expected. But instead, he rolled with it. He has made the best of his life at school and is really enjoying it despite only having remote classes still. He has found things to do, he has found a part-time job, and is probably doing better in his classes with fewer distractions. He rolled with it and is better for it. Isaiah 41:10. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Remember, God is with you. He will help and guide you. We also need to remember the fourth commandment as we hear rules from our diocesan and government leaders. As long as they're not leading us to sin, we are to honor what they're asking of us. As for my family, we dealt with some drama that came along with teenagers not being able to see friends, theater productions being canceled, and Conquest Boys Club and other youth groups being stopped. Katie and I had a difficult time trying to make the right decisions when the information that was being given to us was changing every day. One week we'd think it was okay that the kids could see a friend or something, or we could gather with some folks, and the next week the news would change and we'd be back to lockdown. All of us adults had a tough time with that oscillation. Imagine what it was doing to hormonal teens and preteens. We started a garden as a family hobby. We went on a lot of walks and got to know some of our neighbors even more. We continued our daily prayer rituals as a family to keep some routine. We attended Mass in our living room when it was the only option. While in-person worship was not available, our domestic church kept chugging along the best we could without the recharge we were used to getting at Mass. For those that have gotten back to Mass, who remembers the feeling the first time they stepped back into their respective church? Who remembers the feeling of being able to receive communion after a long drought? I remember tears in my eyes and appreciation that I hadn't felt in a long time, even though I should have had that appreciation all along. If you haven't made it back yet, whatever your reasons, I promise that when you do, it will be an amazing feeling. I can't say that I love wearing a mask at the store or when I'm at Mass, but I'm grateful that wearing one gives others the comfort they need so that these places can be open. I'll even admit that on those super cold days, wearing the mask was kind of nice. My daughters had recently been taking lessons on sewing, and they had no idea how useful this would become. Early in the pandemic, when mask or no mask mayhem was going on, the shortages began. Katie arranged with several in-need locations in the area for the girls to make masks from fabric we had at home. As they became available, they received donations of fabrics and elastics and donated over 200 masks to essential workers and medical professionals. Once there was some stability in PPE, they started making masks for people who needed them and ended up sewing over 500 masks total. This was a great tool for our girls to use their skills to help others. They did get donations of coffee gift cards and some cash to keep them going, but they really understood they were doing something to help others. Katie was constantly in contact with someone about mask orders. You could drive by our house any day and you'd see a grocery bag tied to our garage doorknob for contactless pickup. I'm sure that some of you watching came by during those crazy months last year. It was something that they would not have gotten to experience if it wasn't for this pandemic. Some good came from the bad. In all of the terrible death and uncertainty, there were still lessons to be learned and blessings to be counted. It isn't to say that something that is bad isn't actually bad, not at all, just that we can learn and grow through the good and bad in our lives. Some say that we grow more when encountering adversity than we do when things are all going our way. I'll leave you with a corny analogy that I use when talking about raising our kids that I think is very applicable to our lives in general. I assume that most of you have seen river rock. If not, it's a very smooth type of rock that you see in gardens, often for decoration or cover. I want you to picture a river. In that river, you have a stone at the bottom and a tree that was planted and growing before the river really started flowing. They are both experiencing the same thing. The river is flowing over and around them, but the stone lets the water shape it and smooth its rough edges. The tree just tries to resist and stand up to the water. Eventually, it will get beaten down. Want the river to affect it at all, and in having that approach, it's destroyed by it. Our lives and the troubles we face are like the river. We can let them smooth our rough edges like the stone, or we can try to fight against them like the tree. We can accept them as part of what God has intended to shape us with, or we can harden our hearts and try to go it on our own. Let's move forward in life, realizing that there will be troubles, but God will always be with us, and those troubles will help shape us into who God wants us to be. Thank you.